Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to explore ancient humanity's absolute most profound psychological deep dive into the problem of inexplicable pain, the Book of Job. Now look, if you strip away the centuries of religious baggage, what you're left with is an incredibly raw ancient text that forces us to look at a totally universal human truth. How in the world do we process suffering when we've done literally nothing wrong? We are completely bypassing the typical clean Sunday school lessons here. Instead, we're going to examine this story for what it really is, a masterclass on the human condition, on grief, and our absolutely desperate need for answers. So let's kick things off by completely dismantling the cultural cliché of the quote-unquote patient Job. You know the common myth, right? An evil entity attacks a good man, the man suffers quietly, never complains, and eventually, poof, he gets all his stuff back. Well, the actual text reveals something wildly different. First off, it's the divine counsel, not some red-horned devil, that actually initiates this entire scenario. And Job, he's definitely not a quiet, patient victim. He is a raw, furiously angry protagonist who literally wants to take the universe to court. The entire narrative actually spins on this single, completely fascinating Hebrew concept of kanam. It essentially means freely, without cause, or just for no reason. In the opening scenes, the prosecuting figure in the story asks if Job's goodness is kanam, like is he a good person for nothing, or is he just acting good because his life is super comfortable? And later on, it's explicitly acknowledged that Job is being destroyed kanam, without cause and without any underlying sin whatsoever. It asks this genuinely terrifying question: is our loyalty to doing the right thing actually real when the reward completely disappears? And even more painfully, is suffering meaningful at all when there is absolutely no guilt or logical reason behind it? And that brings us to a really vital point about the text itself. The story is deliberately set in the land of Uz, which is a place completely outside of Israel. If you read through the whole text, there is zero mention of the law of Moses, no tabernacles, no covenants, no priesthood, none of it. And that's absolutely crucial, because it shows us this isn't some rigid religious fable meant for a specific in-group. It's a purely universal human story about what happens when the ground simply gives way beneath you. The questions Job raises don't require any specific religious or scholarly background to understand. They're the exact same questions every single one of us asks when tragedy strikes. To truly understand the depth of those questions, we really have to look at the sheer scale of the devastation here. Job loses absolutely everything, and it comes in these terrifying compounding layers. First, his massive wealth and livelihood vanish. We're talking 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen just wiped out. Then, inconceivably, all 10 of his children are killed in a single freak windstorm. Finally, his health is stripped away, leaving him covered in agonizing sores from head to foot. He ends up sitting on the communal ash heap. Now, in the ancient Near East, this was a literal garbage dump outside the city walls. It perfectly represents the physical location of social death. He's just sitting there on the accumulated wreckage of daily life, completely visible to everyone passing by. It's right here, in this setting of absolute social ruin, that his wife delivers this totally devastating line. She says, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." Now, while that sounds incredibly brutal, her words are deeply, deeply human and honestly completely understandable. We have to remember, she has just lost the exact same 10 children. She is watching her husband rot on a literal trash heap. Her words perfectly represent that agonizing moment when our psychological rope just completely runs out and we are ready to surrender to the sheer unfairness of existence. Soon after this, 3 of Job's friends arrive on the scene. These guys are the intellectuals, the absolute best thinkers of their time. And when they first see him on the ash heap, they actually do something profoundly beautiful. They sit with him in absolute silence for 7 whole days. This was the traditional mourning period back then. And honestly, that shared, unbroken silence of mourning was actually the last genuinely kind thing these friends would do, right before they opened their mouths and completely ruined it. So these friends are armed with what scholars call retribution theology, and it works exactly like a clean, logical, mathematical formula. The premise is, the universe is just. The observation, the wicked suffer. And here comes the toxic conclusion, therefore, Job, because you are suffering, you must have secretly done something terrible to deserve this. This logic acts like a blade. It's essentially the ancient equivalent of modern-day toxic positivity. They are desperately trying to find a neat, logical reason for a completely chaotic tragedy, even if it means victim-blaming their best friend. But Job absolutely refuses to accept this victim-blaming. As the friend's logical arguments totally collapse under the weight of his actual reality, Job's speeches start to escalate.
He starts out in chapter 3 by cursing the very day he was born. It's the voice of a man who would literally rather not exist than feel this pain. But then it shifts. By chapter 9, he's moving from raw grief into building a formal, defiant legal case to prove his innocence. And by chapter 19, he's making this wild, defiant claim right from the garbage dump, demanding someone to advocate for him against the total unfairness of it all. The crucial point here is that Job doesn't just want a polite, philosophical explanation for his suffering. No, he demands what the Hebrew calls a goel. Now, a goel was a kinsman redeemer. It's a specific legal and familiar advocate who is culturally obligated to step in and fight for a relative who had lost everything. Job has been stripped of literally every relationship, but he reaches for this concept anyway. He is demanding an advocate who will get down in the ashes, put one hand on him and one hand on the universe, and actually fight for his justice.
Before we hit the climax of the story, the text inserts this really brilliant bridge in chapter 28, posing a massive question. Where can wisdom be found? The poem basically notes that, hey, humans are brilliant. We can mine the earth for silver, we can dig through solid rock, we can redirect entire rivers, but human logic absolutely cannot mine the answer to inexplicable suffering. It's a stark reminder that for 30 chapters, the best human minds arguing about logic, justice, and pain have been mining the completely wrong vein. And then, finally, the universe answers. But God doesn't arrive with a calm theological chart or a neatly printed logical explanation. The voice speaks from inside a violent, disorienting storm, a literal whirlwind. What is so vital to catch here is that this is the exact same category of chaotic, violent weather event that killed Job's children and broke his life back in chapter 1. The divine response doesn't avoid the chaos of the storm, it actually inhabits it. Now, you would probably expect an apology here, or at least a detailed breakdown of that cosmic wager, right? Well, instead of answering Job's why, the voice from the whirlwind fires back with over 60 questions of its own. It starts with, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And get this, not a single question is about Job or his morality. This radically and instantly shifts the power dynamic of the entire debate.
What follows is this dizzying, incredibly cinematic tour of creation. God takes Job through the treasuries of snow, the precise alignment of the constellations, the strange wild instincts of birds of prey, and finally, the terrifying, untamable might of colossal beasts, the behemoth and the leviathan. The universe being described here is completely wild, it is vastly complex, and it is definitively not under human management. It's filled with these powerful forces that exist simply because they were made on purpose, totally independent of human logic or our desire for control. This brilliantly illustrates the true philosophical core of the book. Job wanted a courtroom setting. He wanted a clean, mathematical explanation for his pain. But the response bypasses human math entirely, offering this breathtaking tour of creation that leads to a profound, deeply personal encounter. The shift here is just monumental. The narrative is telling us that the answer to profound suffering is not found in the category of logical reasons at all. It's found entirely in the category of presence and encounter.
Now, there is a fascinating gap here that we have to acknowledge. As readers, we were given the reason for the suffering way back in chapter 1. We know all about the cosmic wager. But Job? Job is never ever told. The voice in the whirlwind never once explains the backstory to him. This gap is a hugely intentional philosophical statement. Sometimes the reason for your suffering might exist out there in the ether, but you will never, ever get the explanation. You just have to find a way to move forward without the why.
After this completely overwhelming encounter, Job responds. For centuries, English translations have kind of made it sound like he's groveling or apologizing for speaking out. But the actual Hebrew word used there is naham. In the context of this specific book, it doesn't mean repent. It means comfort or consolation. He isn't repenting of his anger at all. He is saying he has finally comforted concerning his mortal ash-heap condition. His physical circumstances haven't even changed yet, but an encounter with the sheer vastness of the universe changed what no logical argument ever could.
And here is the ultimate twist in the story. The divine voice turns to the friends, the guys who built those careful, polite, logically coherent arguments trying to defend the universe's justice, and says they got it completely wrong. But Job? The man who screamed from the ash heap, who demanded a trial, who was furious and defiant, he is affirmed. The text explicitly says the angry guy on the garbage dump got it right.
Honestly, this is perhaps the most revolutionary takeaway for a secular audience today. The raw, honest, and agonized demand for truth is celebrated here over polished, comfortable, and toxic systematic answers. This text should deeply empower anyone going through inexplicable hardship. It practically gives you permission to stop accepting easy, dismissive answers from people who are just trying to make themselves feel better about your tragedy. It powerfully, unequivocally validates your own honest anger at the unfairness of the universe.
At the very end, Job's life is restored. He rebuilds his wealth, and he actually does so with this beautiful, countercultural generosity, giving his new daughters an unprecedented inheritance alongside his sons. But we really have to read this carefully. The profound psychological shift happened before any of this stuff returned. And crucially, the original 10 children are still dead. The scars remain very, very real. The past is not just erased with a magic wand. The story makes it crystal clear that the ultimate comfort was not the eventual restoration of his stuff, but the fact that someone showed up to sit in the ashes with him.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, truly profound thought. The book of Job leaves us with a challenge. Can you endure the chaos of the universe without demanding a neat explanation? And maybe even more importantly, when the people you love are sitting on their own ash heaps, can you resist the urge to offer toxic, logical fixes? Because true comfort isn't about having the right answers to someone's pain. It's about having the courage to simply sit down and share the weight of their broken things. Thanks for joining me today, and keep seeking those deeper truths.